behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog, and it is Wednesday. Yes, it is Wednesday. Today we've got a really good show for you. We're going to be recapping a stream from last night that went quite well. It was very, very informative. We're going to be critiquing some of the finer points that we talked about, doing the highlights. But it's a very, very important stream, an interview with Dr. Dylan Burdette, that if you have any questions at all about the vaccine, its effectiveness, when it's available, pretty much anything that you could ask about it, we covered it last night. So it's extremely important that you can see it. And we do have on our different platforms and sites to catch the recording of it. And I'm sure that we'll probably be restreaming it again at some point. But today, Kerri and I are going to discuss it at some length, which reminds me I should probably introduce my lovely, intelligent co-host, Mrs. Kerri Barber. Good morning, Kerri.
Good morning, Andy. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in on Wednesday. It is Wednesday all day. Doesn't it feel like it's already the end of the week? So much has happened already.
Feels like it's 2050.
Pretty much. We're still in December of 2020. I'm hopeful that next year will be a little bit better, but we'll see how that goes. But you're right. We had a very special presentation with Dr. Dylan Burdette last night, and I learned a lot. So I cover this stuff professionally, and he came out with some things that I did not know. So the biggest one for me, and I posted a link in our chat so that you can go out and watch the presentation. He was a little animated. So those of you who missed the earlier segments we did with Dr. Dylan in February, March, and April, he was sounding the alarm very early on because of the work that he does. He's a virologist. This is what they do. And he's mentioned it last night, that this is probably the first of many pandemics that we're going to face. And he and others are working on it around the clock. So when this started to bubble up in January, February, he was already sounding the alarm. And I had the privilege of working with Dr. Dylan on the ETO crisis in Northern Illinois and Chicago area. So I knew of his advocacy work from an environmental health standpoint. And I think the reason that I trust Dr. Dylan is because of his body of work in advocacy for people, regular people. And he himself, he's so funny. He's like, yeah, I'm poor just like everybody else. So he gets it. And he himself, he lives in what's called a social justice community. This is primarily low income working class. And this is the area around every major city where we have brownfields and we dump toxic chemicals. And we just kind of ignore how that affects people. So he actually lives in one of 5 social justice communities in Northern Illinois. So he knew what was coming for COVID. And in Chicago in particular, 60% of all deaths occurred in the minority community, particularly Black men. And he called it out. So he was first on the scene with that, and we were so privileged to have him come on and talk about it. And I was surprising that we were one of the few to give him a platform or any medical talking about this. You know, these are issues that affect people in every city, every community, every state. The only ones that were providing a platform for these doctors in Union of Concerned Scientists who were trying to get the message out and say, hey, this is going to be catastrophic. This isn't just the flu. This isn't all of these things. This is catastrophic, and particularly for the minority community. So, Andy, do you remember early on in the Trump administration, we were speculating that they knew too it was going to affect minority communities more than suburban white communities, and that's why they kind of dropped the ball on it, or let the ball drop?
Well, that's a very salient point, right? All you have to do is look at the timeline on all of this, because if you recall, it really didn't, and I've said this, human beings don't react. I'm all for something until it affects me, right? Like the entire thing with the White House, deny. Okay, it's going crazy now. We can't deny it anymore. Shut it down, because now we're all scared to death, right? And so without any, data coming in about what's happening, once the numbers about how this was affecting minority groups more came out, then all of a sudden it seemed odd that now the politicians really weren't as concerned with it as they were before, right? And so that's pretty concerning when you look at the timeline, as I said, right? And I remember Dr. Dillon, and if you recall what we talked to him about early, and his family was in very serious danger for quite a while, just because of where he lived. And the fact that Dillon is a PhD virologist means that Dillon spent an inordinate amount of time in school. So therefore, he's got a probably huge load of student debt on top of everything else that's going on. And that just speaks volumes to who he is, because he was able to continue his selfless work as an activist and an environmentalist and all of these things, right? So all of this stuff combined, it's just, we're so lucky to have access to someone who is so in the know about what's happening, and it's just a treat to, because of who he is and what he does. Right? So that's absolutely, and I do want to give props to the entire organization, Union of Concerned Scientists. For those who aren't familiar with this group, they're on Facebook and Twitter and things like that, and they publish their own papers on ongoing issues, water crisis, things like this. This is a group of scientists, just like Dr. Dillon, who have expertise in their field, sounding the alarm constantly on a variety of issues. This is not necessarily a think tank per se, but they do advocacy work on behalf of regular folks like you and I. So to your point, yeah, Dr. Dillon saw what was going to happen in the cities because that is where he surrounds himself. But then the virus now is taking the exact same path that all viruses take. It's affecting the rural and remote areas now. So this is a standard playbook for any pandemic, anything that, any health issue, it hits the cities first because that's where we're closer together, and we just, we live in close proximity. So it's going to take longer to get into the rural areas. So it was this lack of critical thinking on the part of the Trump administration, where they were like, oh, well, it's affecting the cities and we hate the blue cities and cities tend to vote Democrat, so let's wipe them out, not realizing that they were literally cutting the limb of the branch they were standing on. And that has kind of been the political play amongst any issue, right? So whenever we talk about austerity, people are like, yeah, okay, we need to be able to pay for these things, and how are we going to pay for it? Not realizing that it may take a moment, but you, Mr. White Man, Mr. Middle-aged, Mr. Retiree white man who is pretty comfortable right now
you're going to hurt yourself in the long run. And that's what we're seeing throughout all of the effects of the pandemic, especially when it comes to the stimulus bill, which we've talked about quite a bit. The first stimulus bill went largely to Wall Street and to big businesses. And it came out that Nancy Pelosi's husband, yet again, is affiliated with a company that received the payroll stimulus funds. And Joel Osteen, his church, yet again lied. The administrator said that they didn't get any of the PPE money, and yeah, they sure did. Another 4.4 million was discovered. So I just want to remind everyone, this is Joel Osteen, whose church had to be shamed into opening their doors for hurricane victims to find shelter. Right? I'm not sure what faith they follow. Yeah. I'm not sure what faith they follow, but it's not Christian. I know the Christian faith.
Their janitorial services per cost would have gone through the roof, right?
Not $4.4 million worth, I'm pretty sure. Just to get back to the conversation that we had last night, there were some things that Dylan said. One thing in particular I had not heard anywhere else, and I want to go back and listen to more of it, because he was talking about the course of the vaccine. So what he said was, you get the first injection, and that, like all vaccines, it's not a live virus that you're getting, but it mimics kind of the same pattern, and your body develops a response to it. So you may feel a little bit bad. And then a month later, you have to get the second one. Here's the part that I did not realize. He said that you are not fully inoculated for 3 months. So you've got the first course, the second course, and then you still got to wait. And this is where Dr. Dylan got pretty heated, because he was like, here in our country, and I'm paraphrasing, I want to go back and pull the quote. He said, we prioritized giving a billionaire, Jeff Bezos, money rather than our small businesses and our people. So during this 3-month period, you can still contract COVID, the real virus, and you can still pass it on to other people, and you can still suffer the consequences of contracting that virus during that 3-month period, where we're expected to still go to work and go to school and do everything that we need to do just to survive, rather than what they're doing in other countries, where they're paying people to stay home. They are taking care of small businesses. They are really looking out for their own people, because they recognize the long-term effect of not doing so. Whereas here in this country, we have taken the opposite approach. It's almost like we are fully engaged in cooperative genocide here. And I don't know how else to say it. I mean, I'm trying to be reasonable, not inflammatory, but what else would you call it? Yeah. What?
And I saw a meme on Twitter this morning that was very appropriate for this conversation, and it was a comparison of numbers between. I'm trying to remember which Asian country it was. It was like maybe South Korea or Taiwan or someone. Anyways, the message was that there were slightly more people in that country than there were in the state of Florida. And that was the comparison, right? And when you looked at the numbers of this country, which was in the 21 to 23 million range, this country had somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5,000 cases and 7 deaths, right? And when you look at Florida, there's, with slightly less of a population, they had 1,000 times the number, right? And that whole thing just goes to show you that every possible thing that could have been done wrong to shelter people during this pandemic, to make them whole, to get through it, was not done, right? So when you think about Dr. Burdette's reactions and how animated he was getting and how emotional he was getting, you start to understand that, and we talked about this last night, countries like Australia and New Zealand are now virus-free. They have completely opened back up again. They are back to the daily life that they knew before. Why? Because they kept people whole during this whole thing. The United States cases are still going up, right? The only thing that the capitalists are hoping happens is that this vaccine won't interrupt their plans of making money. And that's just unconscionable to me. But that's their plan of attack, is that the vaccine is going to save the markets.
Well, and that's just it. And this is where we talk about the fundamental misunderstanding of the markets. And it's so weird that here, I'm a journalist. Andy, you're a sound engineer, video editor, all-around podcast guru. How is it that we understand macroeconomics better than these famed economists, the people who have, Nancy Pelosi's ear, who have Chuck Schumer's ear? I don't understand how this is so difficult for them, because in the long run, when you consolidate and monopolize businesses, when you have, the robber barons back again, you have Amazon's got to get their products from somewhere, right? So either they're getting it exclusively from overseas and not manufactured here, then where do people work? Right? So just that brief example, and this is what we see in their stimulus arguments right now. They're still arguing on behalf of these massive corporations and not helping small businesses. And again, the whole fight about not being able to sue your employer if you should get sick, or your family sue them if you should die. The fact that all of these millions of people now have an expense, a medical expense, and we're not talking about Medicare for all reasonably, it is just so beyond the pale that our leadership, and I use that term facetiously, just still does not get it. And the rest of the world is looking at us like, America, what is wrong with you? What is going on? What's wrong with you? And when you look at the argument, should we get a one-time check, another one-time check of $1,200? I was discussing this with someone on Twitter this morning. They obviously do not understand what we go through. $1,200, that's not even a mortgage payment. That's barely rent in a studio apartment. And we're supposed to be okay with that for the next 3 months while this vaccine is rolled out. And we still have a significant risk, right? We're well over 300,000 deaths and millions of people who have this medical debt. So I don't understand how they don't get it. Either you have to come to two conclusions here. Either they are still going by the old rules, the brown shoe thinking on economics, and they're listening to these people that have been telling them this lie of austerity for decades, or they simply don't care. And I'm struggling to figure out which it is. And I think that's part of where Dr. Dillon's, I don't want to, put words in his mouth, but his frustration that this did not need to happen. This never needed to happen at this level, because we have professionals. We have professionals who dedicate their lives to working on this, and they were ready to go, but were told to stand down or didn't get the funding. And same thing for our small businesses. Small businesses are ready to go. They're ready to follow whatever guidelines we set out, but we kept changing the playing field for them. Right. And then, of course, we got to include leadership, mayors and governors who were telling people one thing and they themselves doing something else. Right. So this is this is where we're at. So I didn't check the numbers today, but what are we, 300,000? I'll check them real quick. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's the problem is we've talked about this at nauseum, right? That the American unfettered capitalist system, right, looks to the market for all its solutions, right, because it's profitable, right? It's not worth doing unless it puts money in the pocket of somebody, right, that has influence in the government, right? So if you're talking about making people whole during a pandemic, the giving away of, the quote unquote free stuff that, the rugged individualistic concepts in the US say, that doesn't make anyone money. Right, that's counter narrative to the capitalist agenda, to the profit-taking agenda, right? And that's been laid bare by anybody that cares to look at it, right? That cares to think critically about why are these things happening? Why wouldn't you want your people to survive this? Why are you telling people not to go to work, or you're taking away health care because they're losing their jobs, but you're not going to support them in any way, right? It's if you just think of it in those terms, it's an assault on the senses, right? It's something that just bewilderingly just makes you wonder, do they care if people live or die, right? And the short answer is no, right?
And I liken it to, since the stock market is the measure for the economy, which, by the way, it's not. It's not at all. The stock market is a casino. It is not the measure of the economy, but because they're looking at it that way, I recall there was, I don't want to name the stock guru, but he's like, isn't it funny how every time a company announces a layoff, their stock goes up? So it's never about who got laid off, who was walked out the door. Is there going to be a quality issue? It was, less overhead. Right. So, and I answered this question for somebody yesterday on Twitter. They're like, why are we okay? Where did this come from that we tied insurance to your employment? And I answered the question for him. I said, this is a great topic, and I suggest you go read about it. But there was something called the Hawthorne effect. And this actually started in Chicago, which I thought was interesting, in Cicero. What they were looking at is how to motivate employees. So we're coming out of the robber baron era into industrialization, and you needed to have employees committed to profitability and productivity. So there was a study kind of on human behavior, and what they looked at was the Hawthorne effect, that if employees were being watched, monitored, things like that, they tended to be a little more productive. And this is where you have the rise of the human resources as a profession. It came out of the study. So the Hawthorne effect concluded that when you have programs like Employee of the Month or bonus payouts, or if you grow your middle management, more supervisors for employees, so you go from a flat hierarchy to all of those layers of middle management, then you actually increase productivity with employees. So this was part of, they were building parks and having baseball teams and entertainment. And so think of Hershey's, where you had a community built by the company and everybody lived there and they were all about their corporation. This is that era. And part of retaining employees was having the benefits, not just the ballpark and the park and all of these things, but health insurance, because you had the rise in cost from industrialization and people couldn't afford to trade a chicken to a doctor or whatever else the doctor would take. So the company started to offer those benefits to people. And that is where it came from. So this is a long tradition. And the entire goal of it is to keep you as an employee moving through the cattle herds like you're supposed to. It keeps you tied to your job. It is called economic conscription. It's the same reason we are able to have an all all volunteer military force. Economic constriction. If we don't give them free college, we don't give them a livable wage, we don't give them a path forward, and we make that American dream just a dream, not a reality, then we have people who have to go into the military to afford college and all of those other things. It's the same thing when it comes to healthcare. So the fear is, if we give you free college, if we give you universal healthcare, we pull our resources together, then you are not going to be so loyal to this corporate overlord who is denying you basic rights, like maybe you shouldn't be fired at will. Maybe you should get some time off if you've got a newborn or a sick family member. All of these things, we would upend the system and those means of control over employees. So that's the basic question, and it's not a pretty answer, but that's the reality. So I highly encourage everyone to check out the Hawthorne effect. So Andy, when we talk about why are leaders in the U.S. not addressing COVID the same way that other countries are, you just need to look at the economics of employment in these other countries, like where you have a corporation in Denmark and even in Germany where they require low-level workers to sit on their board of directors. We don't do that here. We have a class system. And so the way that they approach work and the relationship with workers is vastly different than what we have here in the US. Here we literally have oligarchy in politics and a caste system in the workplace. And all of those are meant to keep you from having too much time to think about it, too much education to do something about it, and too much of a free will to have autonomy for your own personal self. So,
right. And the whole idea of the capitalist system is winners and losers, right? That's why the whole idea of Trump being president was, a perfect way to show that there have to be people in society that lose. Unfortunately, with the environment of the last 50 years in the United States, the losers are 99.9% of the population, right? That's the unfortunate part of that. But that's the system, right? We if you want it different, you can't, but people are talking about, well, we need Medicare for all, right? So we should try to get Medicare for all. Well, the people that are calling for Medicare for all really don't have any power, right? And the people that want Medicare for all that don't have that power don't currently have the organizing ability to demand Medicare for all. And it wouldn't take a huge number of population to get politicians to get Medicare for all installed in this system. But the problem is the entire movement is away from systems that are socialist in nature, like Medicare for all, right? So if you're thinking that that's what's going to happen, it's almost more reasonable to think that the entire system has to change, right? I
think you hit on a good point here, Andy, when you talked about, let's look at where Social Security came from. We had politicians and wealthy people who were, I kid you not, they were literally tired of stepping over bodies in the gutter. These were our elderly people who were, camped out, homeless, destitute, some of them dead in the gutter. And the wealthy people in Wall Street and in these rich areas were so tired of this. So this is where Social Security came from. So to your point, Andy, I kind of think that we do have the power, but we need to make them uncomfortable. And I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about, the same thing we did to the Trump administration folks in restaurants. Hey, Nancy Pelosi, I really appreciate your service. This is my kid who needs, this medication every day. And I want you to know that every time that you deny a vote on Medicare, you're hurting my family. So those basic tactics that we perfected when we were pushing back on Trump, we need to do this to all of our representatives, particularly when it comes to Medicare for all under a pandemic. I don't understand, and I've yet to hear a cogent argument against Medicare for all right now. So if we're challenging them the same way, do you remember when, what's her face, Sarah Huckabee was so upset because somebody challenged her at a restaurant and it ruined her dinner? Do it. And you can do it in a friendly way. It's never what you say. It's how you say it. So you can be pleasant and nice, and just put it out there for people and challenge them. Give them no quarter. No, here's my family. Here's how I'm affected. Mr. Schumer, can you explain to me why the 16 million families who have medical debt now from COVID, do you think that's okay? How about your insurance? We're paying for yours. So yeah, that is how I think about it. And Andy, to your point, I think we have all the power. It hasn't clicked yet. And I'm hoping that soon it will, and we don't have to go too much further into misery before it actually does.
Well, and I think that if that occurs, right, I like to play devil's advocate, it's kind of in my nature, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the entire system is set up to allow only people of means to become, lawmakers in the government, right? Like, you have to have the ability to come from a good family that can get you through school, that can get you, where you can get a law degree, because for some reason it's almost tied to the fact that people have to be lawyers before they can become politicians, which is problematic just when you think about it. But so I think that a lot of people that are in government, that have been in government for the last, say, 4, 5, 6 decades, right, are people of means that really aren't connected in any way to anybody in society that is suffering from stuff, right? That is suffering the ill effects of society even before a pandemic, right? This just exacerbates the entire thing. So there's this disconnect that they just don't get it. They just don't understand why people are so upset. Why are they so, are they yelling at me at Twitter? And I think that once the left gets its shit together, or the right, or a coagulation of all people in the U.S. finally say enough is enough, you got to start treating us as human beings, right? It's finally going to register with the lawmakers that, maybe we are doing this wrong, right? There was a tweet that came out from the Biden office, right? And it's not from Sleepy Joe, right? It's from his handler,
right? Because
it was coherent and didn't start with, so here's the deal, right? so, but it was basically just saying, the government doesn't tell people what to do. The government listens to the people, and, so on and so forth, America. And my response to that was, unfortunately, the Supreme Court decided that corporations were people, and your party decided that it was only going to listen to those people, right? And so that's what's happening, right? There is this huge disconnect between the top of society and everybody else. And until that gets breached, there is really nothing that anybody should expect is going to happen positive for the people in the 99%, right? You're going to have to demand it.
Yeah, well, yeah, demand it. So I want to transition a little bit, and I do encourage everyone to go back and watch the replay of Dr. Burdette's. I think what made it a little bit different, number one, is where Dr. Burdette's heart is. Also, we're not corporate owned. So Pfizer's not giving us a check. We are not tied to any insurance company. we can give you the unfettered factual information, which is part of the reason why we love Dr. Dillon, because he didn't sugarcoat anything, and he was very adamant about pushing back on false information from either side. So I loved his take on that. And like I said, it was very informative, exactly what you need to know, as well as he was very frank about how here in the US we're going to roll this out and what the implications are for our chosen path forward. So I will definitely make sure that I post the link a couple times. Please go out and watch it, share it with people, make sure everyone understands it. This is absolutely without any corporate bias in it. And I personally trust Dr. Burdette with his assessment. So I hope that you will at least find some comfort and credibility in that particular presentation. So I want to transition a little bit to something a little bit lighter. We've got a whole litany of headlines that came out, and some of them are kind of funny, actually. So we're still having the MAGA meltdown, which I think is, it's part of the grieving process, right? So this was a very vocal, outspoken, angry group. So what we're seeing is natural as part of that grieving process for this particular segment of our society. So still our neighbors, still got to talk to them, still got to bring them in, still got to get them to come along with us, not necessarily the neoliberals and neocons, but with us. So keep that in mind. But one thing that I thought was interesting, and kudos to Yahoo News, who has just been on fire for the last year, but they're covering two stories that I wanted to talk about. Number one was Trump is quietly, and has been, while he's been talking about election fraud and everything else, he's been quietly prepping Mar-a-Lago as his permanent residence, which makes sense because every time a sitting president loses election or carries out their term, they've got to have some place to go. The Obamas went to the Hamptons. They have a little townhouse in Georgetown. So I think it's like $6.3 million townhouse. But he's transitioning to Mar-a-Lago. So you have First Lady Melania and the Secret Service prepping this. But the neighbors in Mar-a-Lago went, you signed away your rights in 1993. And it's true. So what happened was, in Trump's typical let's make a deal style, he decided that he was going to get some tax breaks and some extra money and some privilege for converting Mar-a-Lago from a private residence forever to the golf course, a private club. And so he cannot go back on that. So when the neighbors, who obviously saw all of this flurry of activity and caught wind of what was going on, went, he cannot live there. It's a private club. So they're actually pushing back. So Trump may have to go back to New York. Southern District is looking for him there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But all of his neighbors said, oh, no, buddy, you made a deal. And the art of the deal was that you cannot live here permanently. You can come and visit.
I hear Arizona is just lovely this time of year.
Oh, they'd love to have him. They would absolutely love it. Or Scotland. He has a golf course there. Go try Scotland. I'm sure
that would work out so well. Oh, yes. The Scottish people, they just adore him.
Yes. No. No. So the other thing that Yahoo, which this one made me chuckle in a mean girl sort of way, I'll admit it. But we talked about on Monday how Trump hosted the annual White House Christmas party and then was a no-show. People showed up expecting him to say a few words or something, and he didn't. So Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, sent out 900 invitations to his own Christmas party, an indoor Christmas party during a pandemic when we're seeing other officials within the Trump administration contracting COVID. Mike Pompeo, in all of his wisdom and glory, decided that he was going to send out 900 invitations to his indoor Christmas party because it's cold in D.C. right now. He had I think they said a dozen people show up. That was about it. So he threw a party and very few people came. So
they were only the ones that have already had COVID that showed up.
Yeah, but you can get COVID again.
They don't know that.
Oh, well, it's still a hoax for them. But my apologies. Yahoo's reporting that 70 people accepted their invitation. So Mike and his wife Susan were happy to host them. He canceled his address and some other speeches and just had a quiet little affair at his house. So that was awesome.
It would be interesting to know what the address is there. Because if you're currently having a hard time finding food, if you hang out at the back of his residence, I'm sure they're going to have a lot of stuff going into, stuff they're going to have to toss.
Yes.
If they're catered for 900 people, right?
Yeah, some lovely little canapes, maybe some pate, and it's all yours. So sorry, Susan and Mike, nobody showed to your COVID super spreader party. But I see it as a positive that people are finally getting the message. No, don't go to a party indoors, no masks. So this one is kind of serious, and it kind of went under the radar. This one was fashion mogul Peter Nygaard has been indicted in sex trafficking charges. So this is very much, kind of the headlines that we've been seeing with sex trafficking and millionaires and private islands. But this one took a kind of a weird turn. This is not the first time that Peter Nygaard has been accused of sex trafficking. By the way, he was arrested in Winnipeg, and Andy and I were talking about there's nothing in Winnipeg. So,
granted, its nickname in Canada is Winterpeg, right? Because of its location and its very harsh climate. But I find it very funny, and I don't mean to interrupt your story, Kerri, but I find it extremely funny that currently Winnipeg is a hotspot in Canada for COVID.
Weird. Okay, well, I don't know if Peter had anything to do with it, but it's really cold and everybody's indoors. So, you know what? Check the bingo halls. That's where I would go and look for super spreaders, bingo halls. And I only say that because I used to live in the UP, and in the winter when it's 70 below and 10 feet of snow out, they only plow to the bingo hall. So that's where you go. So, with Peter was arrested and brought up on charges in the Southern District of New York. So the Southern District of New York is on fire with their legal justice going on, which may be why Trump doesn't want to go back to Trump Tower. I don't know. I'm speculating. But what was interesting about Peter's case is the first time he was brought up on charges, it was because he was having a dispute with a neighbor down in the Bahamas. Of course, he owns a private island, Jeff Epstein style. Of course, he's been accused of trafficking girls there, underage girls, women against their will, that type of thing. But the first allegations came up because his wealthy neighbor had a complaint. And what happened was it came out that some of the women that first alleged sex trafficking had been paid to say that, and they recanted their stories. So this guy, Peter, he was let go, went under the radar, that type of thing. So now there are enough people who have complained, enough women who have said, no, this is really happening, that he was brought up on charges and the evidence was presented to a grand jury, and they went and extradited Peter from Winnipeg. He is now in New York, up on these Jeff Epstein type of charges. So yeah, that's an interesting one. And I hate to make these people the poster children for the wealthy. Like, I can buy and sell anything I want, but I can't help, me personally, I can't help but look at this as we've got the millionaires in Congress who think $1,200 is fine for everybody. And then other people who are on the, I don't know if I call it the other end of the moral spectrum, who are sex trafficking, because the devaluation of life looks the same when it's your life that has been devalued. Right? Not to diminish what sex trafficking does, but I also don't want to diminish the struggle that very real people are going through too. I think it's how they look at us is what is the core of this issue. So if you're a sex trafficker, that person, that body is just there for your own amusement. And the same goes for the worker who shows up today, puts themselves at risk, and they can be replaced at any time because there are 100 more people who need work. Right? So, I don't know. That was depressing. So, and the last thing that I...
Do you want to take a moment for, talk amongst yourselves?
Right. No, well, I want to end on a positive. And I think this is, it's going to come out kind of weird, but hear me out. So we opened our online store yesterday. It's been months in the making. So here's where this is important. So yes, we're selling merchandise to support our mission, to support everything that we're doing, because we don't use AdSense, we don't use paywalls, we don't use anything that would influence the kind of reporting and stories that we cover here. This is all driven by Patreon or us as team members. So what the store allows us to do is to grow and expand and make a bigger network. Perhaps even hire some people that will help us grow in that same vein. So that's one side of it, and that's something that a lot of people are doing. When you have a YouTube channel or you have Patreon, this allows you some extra incentive and income so that maybe you can make it a part-time or move into a full-time job. Everybody's doing that. Here's what we're doing a little bit differently that I think is really exciting. So from the very beginning, we used our technology and our expertise to help other progressive organizations. So if you were a small organization who needed to do a webcast, a podcast, or a webinar to a large group, we've done this for progressive candidates and organizations and things like that. We were more than happy to sponsor that and become your core team to work on that. This made it accessible, lowered the cost, and lowered the overhead that candidates and causes had to reach their people, particularly in a time of COVID. So now we're going to do the same thing with our store. And this means if you are a grassroots organizer, if you are an artist, if you are someone who is working on fundraising for a cause or something like that, and you want an outlet to do that, we will create a store for you, and we will use our platform and everything that we're doing right now to work towards helping you fundraise. So you don't have to go through the tax implications. You don't have to go through the tech. You don't have to go through the setup. You don't even have to go through the final implementation of the design. We will do all of that for you because we've already set it up. So what this does is, let's say you're trying to organize a rally, or, like in Illinois, there was a group that was working on forcing the governor to concede that he did have the power to stop utility shutoffs during winter in a pandemic. So we would be able to help you with making T-shirts and all of these other things that you need and fundraise off our platform, and we will do that for you. So all we ask is just a little bit of the overhead. So what that would look like is a 90-10 split, 80-20 split. Same thing that we used to do when we would do a fundraising at a restaurant or something like that pre-COVID. We will now extend that invitation to anybody who wants some help getting that done. So this is just one more way that we are living the progressive message, the grassroots effort that we have here that we are committed to. So yeah, you'll see more information coming out. But one of the things I really want to call attention to is I love this T-shirt that we have in our store. I think the name of it is Hard Truths, and it's about Medicare for All. And it says, behind every politician is an insurance policy that we paid for. And what I love about that particular shirt is most people don't know that you're paying for not only your member of Congress to have platinum level insurance that you cannot buy. It is not available to you on healthcare.gov. Any state, you cannot get a platinum level insurance policy now, even if you try. But they do, and they're getting it off your dime. So it's every member of Congress, every federal employee, every member of your state legislature, every member of your local elected official who gets insurance, and every state employee. You are paying for the insurance for all of those people, while people in Congress and in your state house are telling you no. When it is far more economical for all of us, we're just creating a pool of all of us on one giant insurance policy with regulations about how much it should cost for an MRI, how much it should cost for your insulin, all of these things. So this is why I love that shirt, because it's advocacy in a fun and snarky way and educates people who actually read your shirt. So that is out in our store right now, along with Hair of the Dog's sweatshirts. So I have already ordered one. Can't wait to get it. So Andy won't be the only one with a Hair of the Dog t-shirt, hopefully very soon. So that is my PSA for our advocacy on the store.
Awesome.
So, yeah, and that's about all I have for this morning. Still a little tired from all the activity last night with the webinar, so I think that's plenty.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm good. Let's shut it down.
Andy's got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I got a shit ton of stuff to do. But
yeah, likewise.
Yeah. No, if you get a chance, it's up on Facebook, it's on YouTube, it's on Twitter. If you have any questions about the vaccine, you have any trepidation about it, we answered just a lot of questions about it. Go check it out. Dr. Dillon is politically unaffiliated except to basically chastise the White House since February and what they've done to make sure that people die in large numbers. But other than that, it's just about the truth, and it's just about trying to ease people's minds in what, debunks the conspiracy theories out there about Bill Gates and RFID chips and all of that crap, right? So go check it out if you haven't seen it. And absolutely. I think that's about it.
Yep, that's it for us. So we will be back here on Friday, and I think we're going to have a special guest on Friday. Are we not? A lovely so. Twitch streamer. Okay.
Yes. We're going to keep that in the bag. We're not going to tell people yet who it might possibly be, but potentially someone who a young person that is going to potentially be a really cool voice and a important voice in certainly in our realm, and looking towards the future. So I'm really excited about it, but you're going to have to wait till Friday to find out.
Great teaser. That works. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you're watching this after the fact, check out the links, and we will have them also up on our YouTube and on our website. So thank you so much. And if you have questions, post them in the comments. We do see those even after the fact. So we really appreciate it. And we'll see you back here Friday for our Fuck It Friday annual show. Well, not annual, weekly show. I need more coffee.
Yes. Well, you can go get some now. Thanks, everyone. You. Take care. We'll see you on Friday.
We bout that, bringing the song. We out here, spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keeping it G. Whoa.